If you have yet to play your first gig, you really need to hear these 9 things. And if you have been gigging, my guess is that you want to get even better at that, so these 9 things are definitely for you too. Today, I'm sharing with you the story of my very first gig and how I failed in so many ways, but learned a ton. And I'll share with you the 9 biggest things, the biggest tips and strategies I wished I knew beforehand. I'm going to share with you so that you can become the pro-sounding drummer that you are made to be. You can do this. Hey, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're here hanging out with me today. I'm here to help you become the pro-sounding drummer that others want to play with and listen to. And we do this by teaching you the core skills that actually help you grow and that really save you time in the practice room. And hey, while you're here, I've got a free gift for you. If you are a busy drummer trying to figure out how can I practice all the things, how can I master the drums if I've just got 30 minutes every day, how do I know what to practice? I've got a free PDF e-guide for you called Know What to Practice, the 3-part daily practice routine for busy drummers. Even if you just got 30 minutes a day, this shows you what to work on with hand technique. There's some cool exercises. What to work on with coordination. We've got a bunch of exercises and strategies for working your coordination and some cool tips for music and listening, like becoming more musical and training your ear. This guide is your one-stop shop. It's got all the key things you actually need to practice. So if you're done being confused by the million things on the internet that people are telling you ought to work on, this is for you. This helps condense it. This is your cheat sheet. Even if you don't watch the rest of this video, go download this guide. That way you can make some growth quickly by knowing exactly what to practice. So it's in the description below. Grab the 3-part daily practice routine. All right, on with today's lesson. I never had plans of being a gigging drummer. I didn't really want to think too much about playing my first gig because the whole thought of it terrified me. I was an introvert in high school. I still am an introvert. And I was perfectly happy just playing the drums in my bedroom, playing to my favorite songs, listening to music, letting piano and drums, those were my 2 instruments, kind of just be my thing that I kept to myself. But beginning of my junior year of high school, at my church, in the high school student worship band, turns out the drummer was graduating. He was moving on to college and they needed a new drummer. Somebody found out that I had played a little bit of drums and I'd been taking lessons for like 2 months, maybe 3 months. And so I got dragged into it and I was terrified. I was terrified that first Sunday because I felt unprepared. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't ready to play with people. How was I going to get these songs together? How was I going to sound good? How was I going to lead the band? Like do all these things that I knew the great drummers did well. I kind of had that idea in the back of my head, but I just felt so incapable. Well, I continued playing Sunday after Sunday and Wednesday night after Wednesday night. And after a few months, a lot of that fear started to subside. But as the fear subsided, a lot of bad habits started creeping in. And that's kind of what we're going to get into today. We'll talk about some of those fears that we all deal with gigging, especially our first gig. But we're also going to talk a lot about some of the bad habits that can rise to the surface if you're not paying attention, because that's what I really want to help you avoid. But here are the 9 biggest things I would tell myself, my 16-year-old self, before that first gig. Let's get into this. Number 1, all future gigs are not determined by how well or not well this gig goes. So if we unpack this a little bit, I was putting a lot of unnecessary pressure on myself, and you might be too. If you're getting ready for your first gig or you're getting ready for your 10th or 100th gig, you might be feeling a lot of pressure, and I think it's because kind of deep down inside we feel like we're only as good as the last thing that we did. If we're trying to be really good at the drums, we're only as good as the last gig that we played. And so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves sometimes. And so I know that I was feeling at that point that, if this first Sunday morning with the student worship band doesn't go well, then I'm doomed for failure. Because at the time I did really want to get good at the drums. I was working hard at it. I was practicing a ton in my bedroom. So even though I was an introvert, I didn't really want to share it with anybody yet. I was working really hard at it and I was passionate about it and I wanted to get really good at it. And so I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. Yes, your first gig is a big deal. And yes, you should treat every gig like it's the gig of your life. A wise musician once told me back in my early days of gigging, he said, I asked him, I want to be a professional drummer. What's the best tip you can give me? I think I straight up asked him that. And he looked at me and just in this real serious manner, he was like, play every gig like it is Madison Square Garden, like it's the gig of your life. And I had to think about that for a minute because at first I kind of laughed and thought, okay, I'll take every gig seriously. But I also believe you have to take that with a grain of salt and not put too much pressure on yourself. Yes, you want to take every gig seriously. You want to prepare as best you can, but know that your entire future does not ride on that one gig. Now we're going to get into some more of all the psychology and the emotions of this a little later and unpack this a bit more. But that is the first thing I would tell myself. Just stop putting so much pressure on yourself to get it right this first time, because you've got the rest of your life. You've got so many more gigs you're going to play. You've got so much growth that's got to happen. And that's the thing, too. You can't expect perfection right off the bat. You're going to grow. You're going to fail. You have to fail in order to grow. And those were things I just didn't understand at the time. I don't think a lot of people understand those kinds of things when they're a teenager, but we live and we learn. So that's a big thing I would tell myself, and that maybe I'm telling you if you're preparing for your first gig. Take it seriously, do the absolute best you can, but know that it is not the end of the world if it doesn't go well, because your entire future of gigging is not determined by this one first gig. Number 2, shifting direction here a little bit into some gear stuff. Don't slap a bunch of MOONGEL on the toms because you don't like the way they sound. That's one of the first things I would tell my 16-year-old self, because I remember that the house kit, it was actually a pretty nice kit that we had at my church. That was our house kit at the time there, where we did student worship. The toms just weren't tuned well. They just sounded bad. It was kind of like, it makes me think of like if you set a rack tom on the floor. You just set it on the floor and you hit it. That's kind of what those drums sounded like, where the top head was just tuned too high. Maybe the bottom head was too high and it was choking it out. Either way, there wasn't really any tone. And so what was my solution? I didn't know better, so I was just slapping MOONGEL on there, because that got rid of the obnoxious ring and made it at least sound better to my ears. Of course, the truth was the drums really needed to be tuned. But the thing was, I was afraid to mess with them. I didn't want to try to retune anything, not because somebody told me not to, not because there were rules like, oh, don't retune the drums. I've heard that rule in churches before, but we won't go there. It wasn't that anybody told me not to retune the drums. It was that I was afraid that I would make them sound worse. They already sounded so bad, but I was afraid they would sound worse if I messed with them. And so I didn't, and so I just played it safe and stuck MOONGEL there. So my message to my 16-year-old self, and maybe this is for you, is don't be afraid to try to retune your drums. Odds are they're not gonna get worse. You have to learn, just like, talking about failing and learning, you have to fail at some tunings to figure out what doesn't work. You've just got to experiment. And so what I wish I had done was just messed around with it. Just play around with it. What did I have to lose? They already sounded bad. They weren't going to get any worse. And so don't be afraid to retune your drums. Long story short, as far as the tuning goes, I'll definitely link some videos in the description if you want to learn more about that, because we're not going to get into all the nitty-gritty of the tuning today. But what I should have done was just get the top head in tune with itself. Tap around the edges. This drum's pretty in tune with itself. Make sure you've got everything in tune with itself, so you're hearing the same pitch at every lug. Get the bottom head in tune with itself, and then hit the drum, see how it sounds. If it's too choked out, maybe tune the bottom head down a little bit. Maybe tune the top head down a little. If you're wanting a thunderous floor tom, don't have the top head too tight. Go a little looser, and then if you need more tone, maybe bring the bottom head up. But just play around with that ratio, because if you get each head in tune with itself, you really can't go wrong. And then it's just experimenting, and it's just, finding, your personal taste, honestly, and playing around with that ratio of top head tuning to bottom head tuning. Number 3, don't try to play so many notes. Stop trying to impress people. Man, this was one I was so guilty of as I got going. So I told you I was terrified that first Sunday, but as the months went by, I got more and more comfortable. And what happened? I wanted so badly to be good at this and be seen as good at the drums. And I didn't really understand what it meant to be a good drummer. I knew that I saw drummers on YouTube playing crazy chops and being awesome and everything. Awesome. And I wanted to be like them. And that was the problem. At the time, YouTube was kind of new then. And I would search, great drummers on YouTube, and all I would find would be flashy chops videos. And so that's what I wanted to be like. That was my inspiration. And so I was spending a lot of time trying to figure out, how can I play like a fast fill here? What's like the fastest thing I can play in this song? And so I was wasting so much time trying to impress people. And there's a lot of things we can get into here. But long story short, you impress people by being solid, by having good time, by sounding good. Means mixing the kit well, being nice and strong with your backbeats, and smooth and consistent so your dynamics are under control and they're even. And then making sure you're playing in time, and you're playing for the song, and you're playing musically, and you're not worrying about what licks you're going to play. You're not trying to play fast. Those are the things that impress people, but I just didn't quite get that at the time. So what I want to make sure you've got foundation-wise, that you've got under your belt, that you've got, in your head going into a first gig or going into any gigging situation, you can always fall back on steady time and steady dynamics. That's what I want you to focus on. That's what I want me to have focused on. Instead of worrying about what is the fast thing I can play here that's going to sound cool and impress people, how can I just be nice and simple and straightforward and actually sound good? Because that's something you can rely on and something that other musicians appreciate, and that's the mark of a good drummer. Honestly, I think a lot of that came out of me overcompensating. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of not being accepted by my peers. I was afraid of being bad, seen as bad at the drums. I wanted to be good at it. And so I was overcompensating in every way I could, and I was playing a bunch of notes thinking that would impress people. And so a lot of times these mistakes, it's stuff in our head. You know, it's some kind of fear that's driving us, that's causing us to not actually be as good as we can. A lot of times we are in our own way. And that was something I learned. I had to let go of that fear and stop worrying about what people thought of me and just be solid. Along that sort of line, point number four, relax. Relaxing is the key to sounding good, and it helps create great feel. That was something I know I was not doing at the time. Now, there's a couple of components to this, and you do want to physically relax as you're playing. Relax your shoulders, relax your arms, make sure you're playing loosely. All that comes down to core technique, which we talk about a lot here on this channel. I'll link some videos below. But having a nice loose fulcrum or loose relaxed stroke, let your arm move a little bit and your wrist move a lot and the stick move a bunch within your hand. All of that is key to being relaxed and also staying relaxed up here. But a lot of it's also psychological, and a lot of it's also related to preparation. Like, did you prepare well for the gig? And so that was something I had to figure out. I had to figure out a system for preparing. How am I going to learn these songs? How will I go into this confidently, knowing, all right, I can do this. I can play these songs, so I can, relax and just make music now. That was definitely a challenging thing for me at first. So along those lines, each of these tips kind of builds off the previous one. Number 5, spend more time learning the song rather than finding places to insert special licks or fills. Play what the song needs, not what you want to play. So my mistake early on was spending more time playing and figuring out what's something cool I can do with the song. Like, how can I make this my own? How can I make this song my own by inserting my own crazy, unmusical fill into it, rather than sitting there and just listening to it and thinking through, like, what does this song need? What is the essence of this song? How does this song feel? What's the emotion here? What are the parts needed? I also wasn't paying attention to kick pattern. I wasn't paying attention to what fills the drummer on the recording was playing, because I just wasn't spending enough time really sitting and being still and quiet and listening. That's something that I think we miss in our early days of drumming, when there's so much anxiousness built up and maybe adrenaline and excitement and good emotions. Maybe it's not all stress and fear and performance anxiety. Maybe it's some good emotions, but it causes us to kind of just rush through the preparation and not actually sit back, relax, put on our headphones, and really listen to the music and immerse ourselves in it. That was something I totally failed at for a long time, and I don't think I even started really doing that till I was in college. I don't want that to be you. I want you to get really good at listening and just being still and soaking in the music, so that then you can get on the kit and play musically and appropriately. As far as specifics go with that, what you want to do is play in a way that supports the vocal and the melody first. So you're not playing in a way that draws attention to you, you're playing in a way that draws more attention to the melody. How can you support the melody or the vocal as best you can? That's the biggest thing you want to listen to as a drummer. You want to listen to the singer. What is she singing? How does that melody feel? How is she phrasing it? What fill can you play, or maybe not play, to help support that, to bring more attention to it so that she sounds better? That's the most important relationship in the band, as far as you're concerned. Drums, vocal, not drums and bass, not drums and keys, drums and guitar. Yes, there are relationships there, but the most important relationship you need to be focused on as the drummer is you and the melody, which is probably a vocal if you're playing most popular music, or especially singer-songwriter music. That was something that was just going past me at the time, and I didn't learn until I started to mature a little more musically later. So know that that's something else to fall back on. Good time, smooth dynamics, and listening to the vocal. By the way, there's a lot more lessons here on the channel about this kind of stuff, as well as memorizing songs, like understanding song form. So I'll link some of that below too. You're probably starting to notice how a lot of these things are related, and we could put all these tips under the umbrella of sounding good. There's a lot that encompasses that. So number 6, kit mix is more important right now than anything impressive that you might play. And that's what I wish I had understood, that the way you mix your kit, the volume that you hit your kick drum, the volume you play your backbeats on the snare, how loud you hit your cymbals and your hi-hats, All of that is way more important than any impressive lick or fill you might try to throw into things. So I was playing acoustic drums at my church in a fairly small room. Basically, our youth room was kind of like, picture like a small comedy club that could, if you pack it out, you could squeeze like 150, 200 people in there. It kind of had the feel of like a 2000s comedy club. And so the drums were loud in there. You know, we had these ZBT rock cymbals, and if you weren't careful, it was so loud. So that was something I had to think about, and not being too loud, but what I wasn't really aware of at the time was, okay, I can still be pretty strong on the kick and on the snare and on the toms. It's just the cymbals I got to watch out for. And so that kit mixing, if I had done that well, that would have helped my sound so much, and it would have helped my confidence a lot because I could have known that my playing felt better and sounded better, but I just didn't know what I was doing. And that was something I had to learn, something I had to figure out over time through recording and listening to recordings of myself. Basically, my kick and my snare were too weak, and my cymbals were too loud. So I was just wailing away on the cymbals half the time with my right hand, and meanwhile my left hand was real wimpy down here on the snare, and my kick wasn't strong enough. So my advice to you, if you are new to the drums or new to gigging and you're playing in small rooms, focus a lot on your dynamics of, you know, the individual things you're hitting. Stay light on the cymbals, don't smash the crashes, but be nice and firm with your backbeats. Even if you're playing in a small room, you can still give the snare a firm backbeat. I'm being very light on the ride and definitely not crashing it much. If I were to play a crash, nice and strong on the drums, light on the cymbals. That's going to produce the proper feel that doesn't feel upside down. It'll feel top heavy if you're too loud on the cymbals and not loud enough on the kick and snare. That's just a washy mess. You want to make sure you keep your cymbals quiet, drums strong. That's definitely my biggest advice for a new drummer getting into gigging, because odds are you're going to play a lot of small venues before you play any big venues, and that's so helpful to know. Number 7, you will have way more fun on the gig, and there will be way less performance anxiety, way less fear, way less self-consciousness if you just relax and listen to what's going on around you. That was something I did not really settle into for years. The whole idea of, as I'm playing, relaxing and actually listening. But what's really cool is when you start to listen, and you're not just focused on yourself, you're getting out of your own head, out of your own way. You're listening to what's going on over here. You're paying attention to the vocal and the melody like we talked about. When you do that, you suddenly, you actually relax more. You stop fearing. You stop worrying about yourself. You start thinking more about what's going on around you instead of worrying about the notes that you're playing and fearing mistakes. You fear mistakes way less. A lot of the anxiety goes away. A lot of the fear goes away. And instead, you heighten your musical senses and you actually start sounding better. You start making music and your feel gets better, your time gets better, and you start having fun. That's where the fun comes in. And there just wasn't enough fun in my playing early on because I was too busy worrying about stuff. But if you can relax and listen to what's going on around you, you're going to have way more fun. You're going to play way more musically and you're going to sound better. Now, that's not something that'll happen right off the bat if you're a total beginner. You do have to develop a level of competency on your instrument, enough technique and enough coordination that you can then shift your listening elsewhere. But there's so many great ways to practice that. We talk about it on the channel. I'm linking a lot of ear training, listening, exercise kind of lessons below in the description. A big one is just spend a lot of time playing so that a lot of the basic grooves and simple things we play can become autopilot, because there's no reason you need to be thinking too much if you're playing. That shouldn't require a whole bunch of thought. You should be able to play that and listen to what's going on around you. And the more you play, the more hours you log doing this, the more complex of a pattern you can play while still shifting your listening outside of you. It does take some time and some patience, but it is something you can most definitely do with practice. Number 8, this is a good one. Everyone is not staring at you, and they really don't care how well or not well you do. So this kind of goes back to our, it goes back to our first point about, this first gig doesn't determine the rest of the gigs. And also the third point about playing so many notes. I was worrying about what other people thought of me. I was playing way too busy because I felt like I needed to impress people. And so this kind of, our number 8 here kind of gets into the core of why that was. I know this sounds a bit cynical, assuming that nobody out there in the audience cares about how well or not well you sound. They don't care whether or not you mess up, whether or not you're awesome or not awesome. But a lot of times it's true, because think about it. We all have our insecurities, we all have our self-consciousness and our things that we worry about. And the majority of humans are more worried about themselves than they are about you. And they're worried, they're busy worrying about their own issues, their own problems, their own insecurities, too busy doing that to actually pay a lot of attention to what you're sounding like, especially going back to this high school situation when we were all teenagers, 16 years old playing the drums. All of my teenage peers out there were probably way more concerned about their own trying to be cool and trying to fit in to really worry about whether or not I was cool and whether or not I was fitting in. And so that's kind of the funny irony about it. We're also worried about ourselves and how other people perceive us, but because we're also worried about ourselves, we don't actually pay any attention to anybody else. So none of us are really noticing anybody else, which is not necessarily a good thing. We're all too stuck in our heads. And that's a discussion for another video. We can talk about that for a while, because that's a deep psychological thing that will hold you back from succeeding at something, because you're so worried about what people think about you. And that's something that those things are going to nag at you, but you have to push them aside. You have to not worry about that and just focus on being the drummer that you're made to be, being the drummer that you're called to be. And honestly, so a less cynical look at this is that best case scenario, the people out there in the audience are your friends, your real friends, and they want you to succeed. And so they're not going to judge you harshly if you mess up. Instead, they're cheering you on. That's what your family and friends are for. Your true friends and your family are there to help cheer you on and encourage you and want you to succeed. And so don't be intimidated by the fact that there's an audience out there. It's okay. Now, as we kind of just continue going deeper into a lot of the internal struggles here. And so to wrap up, number nine, just because you want to be good at this, just because you want to be a great gigging drummer, doesn't mean that it determines your value or your identity. And this is something that, if we're honest, I think we've all struggled with this from time to time. I know this was a huge one for me. The biggest reason why I struggled with so many of these things when I was in high school, and I still have to deal with these things from time to time, I felt like I could earn people's love by being good at something. A lot of us, depending on your personality, that might be you, a lot of us feel like in order to earn people's love and acceptance, we have to be good at something, because we feel like they appreciate us for what we do, not for who we are. And that's something that will get in your way, because you're going to be way too worried about trying to impress people, and you're going to be too worried about what people think to actually reach your full potential at something. And so that was something that I definitely struggled with. And what I recommend you do, my best advice, is surround yourself with people who love you regardless of your skills. Hopefully that's your family. Hopefully that's your spouse. Hopefully you've got some good friends who will love you and accept you no matter your skills, no matter your successes or your failures. Thankfully, I was blessed in this situation in the high school worship band. The other kids who were in the band, they were very encouraging, and we all loved each other and accepted each other and didn't care, if somebody messed up, it was fine. And so within our circle, there was a lot of acceptance and encouragement and not rejecting anybody because they messed up. It was more about, where are everybody's hearts? Where are our motives? We're all happy to be here. We're excited to be here. We want to lead worship for the youth group. And that was what it was all about. And so that helped me refocus and not worry so much about what the cool kids back there on the back row thought. Who cares what they think? All that matters is, hey, we're here leading the youth group in worship together, and we're cool. We're cool with that. And so that was a huge help. So what I want you to make sure you're doing as you get into this, whether you're brand new to the drums or whether you've been gigging a bunch, if you've dealt with any of these struggles, I want to make sure you keep your identity straight. As I'll say, as a Christian, I believe that you're made in the image of God. I believe I'm made in the image of God. You're made in the image of God. And that's your identity. And so know that and keep that in mind, whether you're succeeding, whether you're failing, whether your first gig goes great, whether your first gig goes terribly, whether you just feel like you're failing as a gigging drummer, but it's something that you're made to do, that you're called to do. Keep that identity straight and you'll be fine. That'll solve a whole bunch of things. That'll solve a whole bunch of struggles. So if we can sum all of this up, really this ninth point is what I really want to leave you with, because when you can shift your focus away from trying to earn people's love by being good at something, that really helps you relax and know that, hey, it's okay. I'm going to take this in stride. I'm going to get better and better step by step, week by week, month by month, and year by year. So the big thought, big statement I want to leave you with is, you can go into your first gig or your 10th or 100th or 1000th gig without fear, and you can become a confident musical gigging drummer. You can do this. You can do this. There might be internal struggles you got to deal with, and there are things we all have to face, and you might have to fail in order to succeed and get good at something. We all have to fail a million times, but that's okay. So I want you to think about this. Which of these 9 points was for you? Which of these things have you struggled with? What do you need to work on right now? I know all 9 of these obviously are things that I struggle with, and odds are more than a few of these you've faced if you're honest. So dig deep. You don't have to leave a comment and tell me about your deepest, darkest emotional struggle. That's okay. But I want you thinking about it. Maybe write these down. Like, write down, what are the biggest fears? What are the biggest issues holding me back right now from success? Where if you imagine your life without that obstacle, you know that you'll just be free. That might be a good way to think of it. You know, what is the thing that's holding you back? Where if you can overcome that, if you can deal with that, then you're going to make so much faster progress. Write those things down. That way you're seeing them, you're being honest, you're admitting that they're there, and that's going to help you move past them and really help you grow, because I believe in you. And by the way, I hope you're surrounding yourself with people who believe in you, people who encourage you no matter what, whether you're failing or whether you're succeeding. I hope you believe in you, because I believe in you. Drumming is a learned skill that everybody has to work at. Even if you don't feel super talented, that's okay. I had to work hard at this. I had to fail a bunch. Probably same story for you. So be patient with yourself. Be patient with your growth. Work hard, practice hard, but have confidence in knowing that you can do this. You can become a gigging drummer. You can sound like a session drummer one day. You can master the drums no matter where you're at. All right, before you go, I want you to grab that 3-part practice routine. Know what to practice, the Busy Drummer's Guide to growing consistently in just 30 minutes a day. That way you know what hand stuff to work on, what coordination exercises to do, and what music and listening exercises to do. It lays it all out for you. It's totally your cheat sheet, your guide. So go grab that, download it, print it off, whatever, take it to your practice room. That's in the description there. Thanks for hanging out with me today. As always, so glad that you chose to spend this time here on The Non-Glamorous Drummer. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I hope you gained a lot out of this. I hope you have a great week. I'll see you on the next video. Stay non-glamorous.